If you've been feeling like you're constantly behind, mentally exhausted, and carrying more than you can handle, this video might be exactly what you need today. Because the truth is, overwhelm rarely disappears on its own. Left unchecked, it often grows to chronic stress, emotional exhaustion, burnout, and eventually health problems. And what surprised me the most is that habits that eventually helped me the most weren't even complicated at all. In fact, one of them was something my therapist suggested to me years ago. And it completely changed how I calm my mind when life feels too heavy. Hi, I'm Melika. I'm still figuring out a lot of this myself. But on this channel, I share what I'm learning about stress, healing, emotional resilience, and creating a calmer life, while hopefully helping you feel a little less alone too. And make sure you stay until the end, because the fifth habit is something I come back to almost every single day when life starts feeling overwhelming again. When we are overwhelmed, most of us try to think our way out of overwhelm. But overwhelm isn't usually caused by lack of thinking. It's often caused by too much thinking. For most of my life, journaling was my coping mechanism. Whenever I felt hurt, angry, anxious, ashamed, frustrated, or stuck, I would grab my notebook and start writing. Not because I was trying to find solutions, but because my mind was crowded, like having 50 browser tabs open at the same time. The more overwhelmed I felt, the faster my thoughts started spinning. And the strange thing was, those thoughts felt often much bigger in my head than they looked once written down on paper. Seeing them on paper didn't magically solve my problems, but it helped me see them more clearly. And sometimes that's exactly what we need. The goal isn't to write something beautiful. The goal isn't to write something inspiring. The goal is simply to empty your mind. Grab a notebook, set a timer for 5 minutes, and write exactly what you're thinking and feeling. Without censoring yourself, without trying to sound positive, without trying to fix anything. You don't need gratitude prompts, you don't need a fancy journal, you don't need a perfect morning routine. You just need somewhere for your thoughts to land. Because sometimes the fastest way to calm your mind is to stop carrying everything inside it. And once I started getting those thoughts out of my head, I discovered something more powerful. Something my therapist told me years ago that sounded too simple to work. But it ended up becoming the most important tool in my recovery. This is the habit that surprised me the most, and honestly, it's also the habit that changed my life the most. Years ago, after my burnout and my PTS diagnosis, my therapist gave me a piece of advice. Just 3 words. Use your hands. At first, I didn't understand what she meant. I remember thinking, how is that supposed to help? My problems are in my head. My stress is in my head. My anxiety is in my head. But she explained something I'll never forget. When we're overwhelmed, our minds are trapped in constant thinking, constant worrying, constant analyzing, constant trying to solve problems. And sometimes the best we can do is gently move our attention to somewhere else, into something physical, something simple, and something repetitive. So I started gardening, I started crocheting, started knitting, sometimes even cleaning. Not because any of those things solved my problems. They didn't. The responsibilities were still there. The grief was still there. The stress was still there. But for a little while, my brain stopped trying to fix everything, and that felt like a relief. For the first time in a long time, my mind had somewhere safe to rest. And today, I still use this habit, especially when I notice myself overthinking, living in my head. And the beautiful thing is, the activity itself doesn't really matter. You can crochet, garden, cook, paint, organize a drawer, fold laundry, work with clay, color in your coloring book. The goal isn't productivity, the goal is regulation. You're giving your nervous system a chance to slow down, a chance to breathe, a chance to remember that not every problem needs to be solved right now. Because sometimes your mind calms down when your hands get busy. But there was another habit that helped me even more. And unlike journaling and crocheting, this one got me out of my own head completely. And it starts with something we already know we should do, but often we don't. When we are overwhelmed, our instinct is often to sit down and think harder. We tell ourselves, if I just think about this long enough, I'll figure it out. But sometimes the solution isn't more thinking. Sometimes the solution is movement. A few years ago, when I returned to full-time job after being away for several years, I felt like I had something to prove. I wanted to show I was capable, reliable, productive, strong. So I pushed myself hard at work, at home, everywhere. I worked all day, took care of my family, managed responsibilities, planned everything, thought about everything, and my mind never really stopped. Not even at night. I was constantly thinking about my work, responsibilities, health, finances, the future. And what I eventually discovered was that many of my problems didn't get clearer when I sat down and worried about them. They became clearer when I walked. Something about moving my body helped untangle what my mind couldn't. Sometimes I'd start a walk feeling completely overwhelmed. And I'd come home feeling like I could breathe again. Not because my problems disappeared. They didn't. But because my nervous system had calmed down. And once that happened, everything felt a little more manageable. You don't need a fitness plan. You don't need 10,000 steps. You don't need fancy equipment. Just start with 10 minutes. Walk around your neighborhood. Walk after dinner. Walk during your lunch break. And every now and then, leave the podcast at home. Leave the music off. Give your brain a chance to settle. Because often the next step becomes clearer when you stop forcing yourself to find it. But there was another habit that took me years to learn. And honestly, this one might be the hardest because it requires doing something most of us have forgotten how to do. Doing absolutely nothing. One of the biggest reasons why we get overwhelmed today is because our brains never get a break. Think about how often you reach for your phone while waiting in line, while drinking your coffee, while eating, even while watching TV. We are constantly consuming information, advice, news, notifications, opinions. And for years, I thought relaxing meant scrolling. I thought I was resting, but somehow I felt more tired afterwards. And eventually I realized why. My brain wasn't getting rest. It was getting stimulation, and those are not the same thing. Rest allows your nervous system to recover. Stimulation keeps it engaged. Even if the content is positive, even if it's helpful, even if it's inspiring. So, one of the simplest habits I started practicing was creating tiny moments of stillness. Not 30 minutes, not an hour, sometimes just 2 minutes, 5 minutes. No phone, no podcast, no music, no productivity. Just sitting, breathing, looking outside, drinking my tea slowly, letting my mind catch up with my life. And over time, those tiny moments started becoming something I looked forward to. Because calm isn't something we find, it's something we create. And finally, there's one habit that quietly affects all the others. Because you can journal, crochet, meditate, walk, but if you're constantly attacking yourself in your mind, everything becomes harder. This may be the most important habit on this list because overwhelm becomes much heavier when we turn against ourselves. For most of my life, I thought being hard on myself was helpful. I thought self-criticism kept me motivated, kept me improving, kept me from becoming lazy. But when I eventually burned out, something became painfully obvious. Nobody was speaking to me as harshly as I was speaking to myself. When I was exhausted, I called myself weak. When I struggled, I called myself lazy. When I made mistakes, I called myself a failure. And the strange thing is, I would never speak that way to someone I love. Not my children, not my friends, not even a stranger, only myself. And that realization changed something for me, because healing doesn't happen when we are constantly at war with ourselves. Healing happens when we feel safe, and that includes feeling safe with ourselves. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, ask yourself a simple question. What would I say to someone I love if they felt this way? And then try saying those same words to yourself. Not because you're making excuses, not because you're giving up, but because compassion helps us heal. Self-criticism usually keeps us stuck. Compassion helps us move forward. And now I'm curious, which of these habits do you think would help you the most right now? Journaling, using your hands, walking, stillness, or self-compassion? Let me know in the comments below. I'd really love to hear from you, and I read every comment. After watching this video, I don't want you to leave thinking you need to start all 5 habits tomorrow, because honestly, that would probably create even more overwhelm. Instead, choose one, just one small habit that feels manageable. One habit that feels realistic for this season of your life. Because healing rarely happens with dramatic changes. More often, it happens through small choices, repeated consistently over time. Less pressure, more peace, one small habit at a time. Now that you've seen a few simple ways to reduce overwhelm, you might be wondering why life feels so much harder when stress and exhaustion build up for too long. Click on this next video, because that's exactly what we're talking about there. You'll learn how chronic stress, emotional exhaustion, burnout, and mental overload can quietly change we experience the everyday life, and why understanding that can be one of the first steps towards healing. Thank you so much for being here with me. I hope I'll see you in the next one. Bye.